Tonight, we begin a journey through the quiet expanse of geological time, where 1,000,000 years passes like a single, slow breath, where nothing is rushed and everything is held in a patient, unfolding stillness. Just let yourself drift, and I will be here, walking beside you through the eons. Tonight, we are going to travel through the quiet heart of deep time, not to learn, not to remember, not to hold on to anything in particular, but simply to drift through a landscape made of millennia, to float across the slow, patient processes that have shaped this world since long before there was anyone here to see them. Imagine, if you will, that you are suspended just above a gentle, rolling landscape, a place of soft hills and wide, open meadows, where the light of a late afternoon sun touches everything with a honeyed, golden warmth. The air is still, and there is no hurry in it, no push, only a calm, steady presence that wraps around you like a familiar blanket. You are not standing on the ground, not exactly, but rather you find yourself floating, weightless and at ease, just above the tall grasses that sway ever so slowly in a breeze that barely stirs. Below you, the land spreads out in every direction, a patchwork of greens and browns and the distant blue of a meandering river that catches the light and holds it, sparkling without urgency. This is the surface of the earth, as it is in this quiet moment, and it is from here that our journey will begin. A journey not through space, but through time itself, through the deep, slow story that is written in every stone, every grain of soil, every curve of every hill. You drift a little higher now, and as you do, the landscape begins to soften at its edges, the sharp lines of the present moment blurring into something more fluid, more patient. The sun does not set, but its light changes, becomes more diffuse. As if you are seeing the land through a gentle veil of memory, you notice that the river below you, that slow, meandering ribbon of water, is doing something remarkable, something utterly ordinary and yet quietly magnificent. It is moving. It is carrying tiny particles of silt and clay, minute grains of worn, down mountain rock, and it is laying them down, one by one, along its banks and across its floodplain. This is happening so slowly that in any single human lifetime, it would be almost imperceptible, but you are drifting now into a different kind of awareness, a different rhythm, and you can sense the cumulative patience of this process, layer upon layer, grain upon grain. The river is building the land, and as you watch, you find yourself sinking softly into the flow of this time, a time where centuries feel like heartbeats, and the great, quiet work of geology unfolds all around you. The river continues its endless, gentle labor, and you drift alongside it, following its lazy curves as it winds through the countryside. On either side, the banks rise and fall, sometimes steep and sometimes shallow, and you can see how the water has shaped them over unnumbered years, undercutting here, depositing there, always moving, always changing, but so slowly, so very slowly, that the change is like a breath drawn in and released over a span of ages. There is no need to focus on any one detail, no need to track the journey of a particular grain. Instead, you let your awareness spread out, wide and calm, taking in the whole gentle panorama of erosion and deposition, the quiet breathing of the landscape. The grasses on the bank dip their heads toward the water, and you see how their roots hold the soil in place, a tiny, living partnership that has repeated itself season after season, millennium after millennium, a rhythm of growth and rest, endlessly cycling like the slowest, steadiest pulse. You feel no urgency, no pull toward a destination. There is only the drift, the soft, present, moment awareness of the land breathing beneath you, and the river singing its ancient, wordless song. And now, very gradually, you become aware that the light is changing again, not in the way of a day ending, but more like the gentle shift of a season stretching out across eons. The air cools, just slightly, and you notice a faint, crisp edge to the breeze, a hint of something ancient and patient. The landscape below you begins to transform, not with any suddenness, but with the slow, dreamlike fluidity of a thought shifting from one image to another. The green meadows and golden hills soften into a wider, more open terrain, and you see, in the distance, a vast, pale expanse that glimmers with a cool blue. White light, you are drifting now into an older time, a time when the world was held in a long, deep embrace of ice. Not a time of drama or catastrophe, but a time of profound stillness, a quiet age of glaciers that moved with a slowness that defies all ordinary comprehension. And you find yourself floating above one of these glaciers now, a great river of ice that stretches from horizon to horizon, its surface sculpted into gentle undulations. Waves of frozen time that catch the low, slanting light of a sun that never seems to rise fully, but instead hovers near the edge of the world in a perpetual silver dawn. The glacier is not still, but it moves so slowly that you would never perceive its motion in any normal way. Here, in this deep time drift, you can sense it, though as a kind of profound, underlying flow, a patient, unstoppable creep that carries the ice forward at the pace of a fingernail growing, or a little slower still. You descend, floating just above the surface now, and you see the intricate details of the ice, tiny bubbles of ancient air trapped in crystalline lattices, faint blue veins that run through the deeper layers like the gentle tracery of a frozen river within a river. The surface is not smooth, but textured with little ridges and hollows, places where the ice has melted ever so slightly and refrozen, a miniature topography of patient transformation. Here and there, rocks are embedded in the ice, carried from far away, from mountains that once stood proud and now have been worn down, grain by grain, and transported in this slow, cold procession. These rocks, some as small as a pebble, some as large as a house, drift along with the glacier, grinding gently, softly, against the bedrock beneath, a sound so low and so continuous that it is less a sound than a deep, resonant hum that you feel more than hear. The grinding is not violent, not harsh. It is a gentle, persistent caress that over thousands of years will reshape the land, carving valleys, smoothing hills, leaving behind a landscape of quiet, rounded grace. You drift along the surface of the glacier, following the curve of a massive crevasse that opens below you, not a sudden, dangerous crack, but a slow, patient parting of the ice, a place where the deep blue of the interior reveals itself. The walls of the crevasse are smooth and glossy, polished by the slow movement of the ice, and they glow with a soft, internal light, as if the glacier itself holds a quiet radiance. You float down into this gentle opening, and the world becomes all shades of blue, from the palest, almost white azure near the surface to the deepest, richest indigo at the heart of the ice. The air is still and cold, but not unpleasantly so. It is a clean, calm cold, the kind that makes everything feel crisp and clear and utterly at peace. Time moves differently here. deep inside the glacier, and you can feel the centuries pressing in around you. Not as a weight, but as a quiet, comforting presence, like the hush of an ancient library where all the books are written in the language of stone and ice and slow, relentless patience. There is nothing you need to do, nowhere you need to go. You are simply here, held in the blue heart of the world, as the glacier continues its timeless, silent journey toward a sea that lies far beyond the horizon of this long ago age. And then, gently, you begin to rise again, floating up through the layers of blue, past the frozen bubbles of ancient air, past the polished walls of the crevasse, until you emerge once more above the surface of the ice. The landscape has shifted again, so slowly that you barely noticed it happening, and now the great glacier is retreating, pulling back with the patience of a tide that takes 10,000 years to turn. The ice is melting, not in a rush, but drop by drop, a quiet, steady release of water that trickles across the surface in countless tiny streams. Glinting in the low, silvery light, these little rivulets braid together, joining into larger streams, and those streams flow down across the newly exposed land, a land of bare rock and fine ground, up sediment, the rock flour that the glacier has made from the bones of mountains. This rock flour, a pale, silty dust, settles in the meltwater and gives it a milky, turquoise hue, a color that is at once soft and luminous, as if the sky itself had been poured into the water and gently stirred. You drift above these streams, following their quiet, unhurried flow, and you see how they carry the fine sediment out across the land, depositing it in thin, even layers, building up the soil that will one day, far in the future, nourish forests and fields and the quiet roots of sleeping flowers. But that is all to come. For now, there is only the soft trickle of meltwater, the pale, milky blue of the streams, and the deep, abiding stillness of a world emerging from the long embrace of ice. Gradually, the light warms and the landscape shifts again, and you find yourself drifting over a vast, shallow sea, a body of water that stretches so far in every direction that the horizon is just a soft blur of water and sky, with no clear line where one ends and the other begins. This is an inland sea, a warm, shallow ocean that covers much of the land you knew before, and it is profoundly calm. The surface of the water is barely rippled, just the gentlest, most delicate undulations, as if the sea itself is breathing in long, slow, peaceful sighs. The water is clear and warm, and you can see down through its sunlit depths to the sandy bottom far below, where gentle currents trace lazy, looping patterns in the pale sediment. There is life here, but it is the quietest, most unhurried kind of life. Tiny, drifting creatures that float on the currents, their bodies no more than specks of translucent light, and simple, soft, bodied things that rest on the sea floor, filtering the water with a patience that matches the rhythm of the tides. You float just above the surface, and you feel the warmth of this ancient sun on your skin, a sun that is not quite the same as the one you know, but still familiar, still golden and generous, and you let yourself drift, utterly at ease, in the quiet cradle of this long, vanished sea. The water is so clear that you can watch the slow, gentle rain of sediment falling through it, a constant, unhurried drift of tiny particles that settle, one by one, onto the sea floor. Some of these particles are grains of sand, worn smooth by waves that broke on shores that no longer exist. Some are fragments of shells, the delicate remains of tiny creatures that lived and died in the sunlit waters, their lives so brief and yet so beautifully part of the great, slow rhythm of the earth. And some of the particles are even finer, microscopic crystals of calcite that precipitate out of the warm seawater, forming a soft, white rain that drifts down through the blue like a gentle snow that never stops falling. This is sedimentation, the patient accumulation of layer upon layer, each one no thicker than a whisper. And yet, over time, over millions of these quiet, sun-filled years, they build up into thicknesses that will one day become stone, become the limestone and the chalk and the shale that will hold the memory of this sea long after it has vanished. You watch this process without any sense of urgency, without any need to count the layers or measure their depth. You simply observe, your awareness as wide and calm as the sea itself, as the particles drift down, 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 and settle with a softness that is beyond all sound. And now, slowly, you let yourself sink just a little, dipping beneath the surface of the sea and drifting down into its quiet, sunlit depths. The water holds you gently, and you feel no need to breathe, no need to do anything but float here, suspended in the warm, blue quiet. All around you, the gentle rain of sediment continues, the tiny white flakes of calcite drifting past you like the slowest, most peaceful snowstorm imaginable. You watch one particular flake as it spirals down, turning slowly in the soft currents, catching the light from above and glowing for a moment before it settles onto the sea floor, joining the countless others that have come before it. And then another flake, and another, each one following its own patient, unhurried path, and yet all of them part of the same great, quiet process, the same slow, steady accumulation that will, given enough time, build a thickness of sediment that will one day be measured in thousands of feet. There is a deep, comforting regularity to this, a sense of order and patience that soothes the mind and stills the heart. Nothing is rushed. Nothing is forced. The sea simply is, and the sediment simply falls, and the layers simply build, and it is all so peaceful, so very peaceful. After a time that might have been a moment or might have been a millennium, you begin to drift upward again, rising gently through the sunlit water until you break the surface and find yourself floating once more above the ancient sea. But the sea is changing now, retreating with the same slow patience with which it once advanced, and the landscape beneath you is shifting once more. The water grows shallower, and land begins to emerge, first as low, marshy islands, then as broader plains, and finally as a vast, open continent of bare rock and wind, swept sand. You are drifting now over a desert of immense, quiet grandeur, a place of rolling dunes and stark, beautiful rock formations that have been sculpted by the wind over uncountable years. The sand is golden and fine, and it shifts constantly but almost imperceptibly, grain by grain, in the gentle, persistent breeze. The dunes themselves are like waves of a frozen ocean, cresting and troughing in long, rhythmic lines that stretch to the horizon, and you notice, as you drift above them, that the dunes are moving not with any speed, but with a slowness that is the very essence of patience. They are migrating, grain by grain, down the direction of the prevailing wind, a process that in a single lifetime would be invisible. But here, in the deep time you are traveling through, is as steady and as constant as the beating of a quiet heart. You float above the crest of one great dune, and you watch the sand grains on its windward slope, how they are lifted and carried, just a little way, before they settle again on the leeward side, building the dune outward, onward, in a journey that will take it across the continent and back again over the course of eons. The wind that moves the sand is a soft, warm wind, and it carries with it the faintest scent of dryness and space. A clean, mineral smell that speaks of rock and sky and the vast, open distances of the desert. You feel it on your skin, a gentle, constant pressure, as comforting as a hand laid lightly on your shoulder, and you let it carry you along, drifting with the sand, with the dunes, with the slow, graceful migration of the desert itself. The sun is large and golden in the sky, and it casts long, soft shadows that stretch and shift as the hours pass, though here the hours are more like centuries, and the shadows move with the weight of ages behind them. You see how the wind has shaped the rocks too, carving them into arches and pillars and fantastical, organic forms, but always gently, always with a softness that takes the edge off any sharpness. The erosion is not a violent tearing, but a gentle, persistent polishing, a kind of caress that wears away the hardest stone over spans of time so vast that they feel like a kind of eternity. And in the quiet of the desert, there is a peace that is unlike any other, a peace born of emptiness and light and the slow, steady breath of the wind that has been blowing since long before there were ears to hear it, and will be blowing long after all our ears have turned to dust. And so you drift on, over the golden dunes and the wind, carved rocks, and the landscape beneath you slowly, almost imperceptibly, begins to change once more. The desert fades, not into something else, but through it, as if the sand itself is giving way to something deeper, something older. The ground becomes darker, harder, and you sense that you are moving not just across the surface of the earth, but downward into its crust, into the deep, silent places where the true, slow heart of geology beat. You find yourself in a world of stone and shadow, a world of immense, quiet chambers and narrow, winding passageways, all of them filled with a deep, cool stillness. This is the realm of the deep crust, miles beneath the surface, where the rock is warm but not hot, where the pressure is immense, but you feel it only as a kind of gentle, all-encompassing embrace. There is no light here, but you do not need light. You are aware of your surroundings through a kind of diffuse, inner sensing, a calm, spacious awareness that takes in the textures and forms of the rock without any strain. The walls around you are made of ancient granite, crystals of feldspar and quartz and mica that interlock in a beautiful, ordered mosaic, each crystal fitting perfectly against its neighbors, a pattern that has held for billions of years. You drift through these crystalline chambers, and you see how the minerals have grown not with any suddenness, but with the slow, patient accretion of atoms, one by one, finding their places in the lattice over spans of time that make the glaciers and the seas and the deserts seem like the briefest of moments. The crystals are not static, they are still growing, still changing, but so slowly that the concept of growth itself takes on a new, almost incomprehensible meaning. An atom settles into place, and then another, and another, and the crystal edge advances by a distance smaller than the width of a hair, and the time it takes to do so is measured in human lifetimes, in geological epochs. In the slow, steady breathing of the planet itself, you pause in one of these deep, crystalline chambers, a space where the walls are studded with great, translucent prisms of quartz that glow with a faint, inner light, a light that seems to come from nowhere and everywhere, a soft, milky radiance that fills the space with a sense of deep, abiding calm. You watch one of these quartz crystals, a particularly large and perfect specimen that rises from the floor like a frozen flame of glass. At its tip, on a scale so tiny that it exists at the very edge of perception, new layers of silica are being deposited, atoms of silicon and oxygen arranging themselves in the hexagonal pattern that is the deep, eternal architecture of quartz. You watch this process without any sense of expectation, without any desire to see it finish. There is no finishing. The crystal grows and continues to grow, and the conditions that allow it to grow may change. But the process itself is endless, a quiet, ongoing conversation between the Earth's deep heat and its reservoir of minerals. A conversation that has been going on since the planet was young. The light in the crystal pulses softly, a rhythm that matches the slowest of heartbeats, and you feel yourself becoming attuned to it. Your own breathing falling into sync with this deep, geological pulse. You are not separate from the rock, not separate from the crystal. You are a part of the same slow, steady, patient unfolding, and in that recognition, there is a peace so profound that it feels like the very foundation of existence. And now, gently, you find yourself rising again, floating up through the layers of the crust, through the granite and the gneiss and the ancient, folded schists, past veins of milky quartz and seams of smooth, dark basalt. The rock around you gradually becomes cooler, more fractured, and you sense that you are approaching the surface once more. The light ahead is soft and diffuse, the light of a world that is still and quiet, and as you emerge, you find yourself in a landscape that is at once familiar and deeply, deeply old. You are standing, or rather floating, on the shore of a primordial coast, a place where the first true continents meet the first true oceans. The rock beneath you is bare and dark, a smooth, wave-washed expanse of ancient basalt that stretches in every direction, unadorned by soil or vegetation. The sky above is a pale, pearlescent gray, not the blue of the modern sky, but a softer, more muted color, and the sun is a hazy, diffuse disk that hangs low on the horizon, casting long, gentle reflections across the water. The sea before you is vast and calm, its surface barely disturbed by the gentlest of swells, and as you watch, the waves lap against the rocky shore with a rhythm that is as old as the earth itself. Hush, and pause, and hush again. A rhythm without urgency, without any purpose other than the simple, eternal act of touching the land and retreating. You drift along this ancient shoreline, and you see how the waves have sculpted the rock, smoothing it, polishing it, shaping it into gentle, rounded forms. The process is so slow, so endlessly patient, that each wave seems to make no difference at all. And yet the cumulative effect, over millions upon millions of years, is written in the very shape of the coast. You are witnessing the quiet, methodical work of erosion on a planetary scale, a work that has been in progress since the first seas formed and will continue until the last seas vanish. A work that is at once monumental and utterly peaceful. There is no life on this shore. Not yet. Or if there is, it is the simplest, most silent kind of life, microscopic and unaware of itself. But the absence of life does not feel like a lack. Instead, it feels like a vast, open potential, a quiet waiting, as if the whole world is taking a long, slow breath before the next great unfolding. The air is still and mild, and there is a kind of pristine clarity to everything. a sense of newness that is paradoxically ancient, as if you are seeing the planet in its original state, a state of pure, calm potential. You float above the gentle waves, watching the way the light plays on the water, the soft, silvery gleam of the sun's reflection stretching across the sea like a path made of light, a path that leads nowhere in particular, but simply exists, beautiful and serene. And you let yourself drift along that path, carried by nothing more than the gentle pull of your own curiosity, your own quiet willingness to see what comes next. As you drift, the sea begins to change, and you sense that you are moving forward in time once more, through the long, quiet ages. The water grows a little warmer, and the sky clears to a soft, familiar blue. The bare rock of the shore begins to take on a faint greenish tinge, as the first simple, pioneering organisms, tiny algae and lichens, begin their slow, patient colonization of the land. This is not a sudden greening, not a dramatic transformation, but a gentle, gradual spread like a soft blush creeping over the stone. You watch as the thin, almost invisible films of life spread across the rock, clinging to the surface, slowly, very slowly, breaking it down into the first primitive soils. It is a quiet, undramatic process, this first blush of life on land. A process that takes millions of years to accomplish what a single rainstorm might do today. And yet, it is beautiful in its patience. In its unassuming persistence, you drift low over the rocks, so close that you can see the tiny, delicate structures of the lichens, their intricate, crusty patterns, their soft, muted colors, gray, green, the faintest orange. They are not doing anything in particular, just being, just existing, just slowly, quietly wearing away at the stone and, in doing so, preparing the way for everything that is to come. And there is a deep, quiet comfort in watching them, in knowing that the world changes not through dramatic upheavals, but through countless small, patient acts like this, each one insignificant on its own, but together, over time, creating all the richness and complexity that will follow. The shoreline fades, and the lichen-covered rocks give way to a broader landscape, a gently undulating plain crossed by wide, slow rivers. This is the time of the great river systems, an age when the continents were gathered together into a single, immense landmass, and the interior of that supercontinent was traversed by rivers of a scale and patience that are hard to imagine. You drift above one of these rivers now, a vast, brown waterway that meanders across the plain in great, lazy loops, its course shifting slowly, inexorably, over the millennia. The river is not in a hurry. It has all the time in the world, and it moves with the ponderous grace of something that knows its own strength and has no need to prove it. You watch the water as it curls around sandbars and cuts gentle arcs into the soft, alluvial banks, and you see how the landscape on either side is a patchwork of wetlands and shallow lakes, all of them fed by the river's endless, generous flow. The air is warm and humid, and a soft haze hangs over the water, blurring the horizon into a golden, indistinct glow. There is life here, more of it now, but it is a quiet life. A life of ferns and horsetails and primitive trees that stand in still, silent groves along the river banks. No birds sing, no animals call. There is only the soft rustle of fronds in the breeze, and the gentle lapping of the water against the roots of the ancient plants. It is a world of profound, vegetative peace, a world that seems to be dreaming, and you drift through it like a dream yourself. The river carries you along, or perhaps you carry yourself, floating just above its surface, watching the play of light on the water, the way the sun catches the ripples and breaks them into 1,000 soft, golden sparks. Time passes, the way it always does here, smoothly and without any sense of loss. The river bends and bends again, and you realize that the bends themselves are migrating, shifting downstream with a slowness that only the deepest, most patient observation could ever detect. The river is eating away at its outer banks and depositing sediment on its inner banks, and over the course of countless centuries, the meanders grow more pronounced, more sinuous, until some of them loop back on themselves and are cut off, becoming oxbow lakes, quiet, still bodies of water that sit beside the main channel, like memories of the river's former paths. You drift over one of these oxbow lakes now, and you see how its water is dark and still, a mirror for the sky, reflecting the soft, hazy clouds and the pale, golden light with a perfect, untroubled clarity. The lake is slowly filling in with sediment and plant matter, a process that will take thousands of years, and as it does, it is becoming a marsh, and then a meadow, and then, eventually, just another part of the floodplain, indistinguishable from the rest. The cycle is endless, and yet it is never the same. And in that paradox, there is a quiet, soothing beauty, a beauty that does not demand attention, but simply offers itself, freely and without condition. Now the landscape begins to change again, and you sense that you are drifting toward a time of greater coolness and dryness, a time when the great interior plains gave way to vast, open grasslands, and the rivers shrank into smaller, more seasonal streams. The air becomes crisper, and the sky takes on a deeper, more vivid blue. You float above a rolling steppe, a sea of grass that stretches in every direction, rippling in the wind like the surface of a golden ocean. The grass is tall and dry, and it whispers constantly, a soft, shushing sound that is one of the most ancient and comforting sounds in the world. The wind that moves through the grass is a steady, persistent wind, and it carries with it the scent of dry earth and distance, a scent that speaks of open spaces and endless horizons. You drift with the wind, letting it push you gently along, and you watch the way the light and shadow play across the grass, the way the whole landscape seems to breathe in and out with the passage of the clouds. Herds of large, slow, moving animals graze in the distance, dark shapes that move with a quiet, deliberate grace, but you do not focus on them. They are simply a part of the landscape, as much a part of it as the grass and the sky and the slow, patient erosion of the distant hills. Everything here is connected. Everything is part of the same slow, steady rhythm, a rhythm that has been going on for millions of years and will go on for millions more. The hills in the distance are worn and rounded, ancient mountains that have been eroded down to their quiet, gentle cores. Once, uncounted eons ago, they were tall and jagged and sharp, but time and wind and water have softened them, worn them down, reduced them to these peaceful, undulating shapes. You drift toward them, and as you draw closer, you see the layers of rock that make up their flanks, layers of sandstone and shale and limestone, each one a record of a different environment, a different sea, a different desert, a different river delta from the deep, deep past. The layers are tilted and folded in places, evidence of slow, patient tectonic forces that pushed and squeezed the land over the course of ages. But the folding is not violent, it is more like the gentle wrinkling of a cloth that has been pushed slowly across a table. You trace one of these layers with your eye, following it along the hillside, and you see how it thickens and thins, how it changes color from a deep, rusty red to a pale, creamy gray, and each change is a chapter in the long, quiet story of the Earth, a story that has no climax, no dramatic conclusion, but simply continues, one slow, patient sentence after another, forever. You drift along the flank of the hill, close to the ground now, so close that you can see the individual grains of sand that make up the sandstone, the tiny, glittering flecks of mica, the smooth, rounded quartz pebbles that were once part of a mountain that no longer exists. You reach out, not with a hand, but with your awareness, and you touch the rock, feeling its texture, its warmth, its deep, abiding stillness. The rock is warm from the sun, and it is rough and smooth at the same time, a paradox of sensation that is deeply pleasing. You let your awareness rest there for a moment, on the surface of the ancient sandstone, and you feel the immense weight of time that is compressed into this single, unremarkable outcrop. This rock has been here, in some form or another, for hundreds of millions of years. It has been part of mountains and part of seas, part of deserts and part of river deltas. It has been buried deep in the crust and lifted up to the sky. It has been frozen and thawed, wet and dried, compressed and stretched. And through all of that, it has remained, fundamentally, itself a collection of grains, held together by time and pressure and the quiet, patient forces of the earth. There is a deep, profound comfort in that, in the recognition that some things endure, that some things persist, not unchanged, but continuous, a steady, quiet thread that runs through the whole vast tapestry of geological time. And now, gently, very gently, you begin to feel a pull, a soft, familiar tug that draws you away from the ancient hills and the golden grasslands and back toward the present, back toward the landscape where you first began this journey. The light shifts, the colors warm, and you find yourself drifting over the same gentle, rolling country that you left so long ago, the country of soft hills and wide, open meadows, the country of the quiet, meandering river. But now you see it with new eyes, or rather with a new, deeper awareness. You see how the hills are made of the same ancient rock you just touched, how the river is still carrying the same sediment it has always carried, how the grass roots are still holding the soil in place just as they did in the steppe, and how the gentle, patient processes of erosion and deposition, of uplift and wearing down, are still going on, right now, in this very moment. Nothing has ended, nothing has been left behind. The whole long, quiet story of the earth is contained in this single, peaceful scene, and you are a part of it, drifting through it, held in it. As you have always been, you float down, closer to the land, and you see the river again, the same river, still winding, still sparkling, still carrying its tiny, invisible load of silt and clay toward a distant sea. The sun is low in the sky now, the same honeyed, golden light that you remember from the beginning, and it casts long, soft shadows across the fields. The air is still and warm, and there is a deep, abiding sense of peace that settles over everything, a peace that has been building throughout this long, quiet journey and now finds its fullest expression in the simple, ordinary beauty of an evening in the present. You drift along the river once more, and you realize that you have traveled through eons, through ice and sea and desert and deep, crystalline silence, and yet you have never really left this place. The river has always been here, in one form or another. The rocks have always been here. The gentle, patient processes of the earth have always been here, and they always will be, long after you and I and everyone we know have become part of the sediment, part of the layers, part of the long, quiet story itself. And that is not a sad thought. It is a deeply comforting one, a thought that settles around you like a soft, warm blanket, wrapping you in the knowledge that you belong to this story. And the story continues endlessly, peacefully, beautifully. You let yourself drift a little longer, following the river as it winds through the deepening twilight. The first stars are beginning to appear in the sky, faint pinpricks of light that are themselves the products of deep time, of stellar processes that unfold over billions of years, in a universe that is itself a vast, slow, geological story. And you realize that the journey you have taken tonight is just one small part of a much larger journey. A journey that has no beginning and no end. A journey that is always unfolding, always drifting, always calm and still at its heart. You can return to this journey whenever you like. You can drift through the ice, or the sea, or the desert, or the deep, crystalline quiet of the crust. You can float above the ancient rivers or rest on the smooth, wave-worn rocks of the primordial shore. The landscape of deep time is always there, waiting for you, patient and welcoming, never demanding, never rushing. And tonight, as you rest, you carry a little of that deep time with you, a quiet, steady awareness of the slow, peaceful rhythms that underlie all of existence. The river continues to flow, the stars continue to turn, and the gentle, patient earth continues its slow, silent journey through space. And you, drifting now between wakefulness and sleep, are a part of it all, held in the great, calm, geological embrace of a world that has been spinning for 4.5 billion years and will spin for billions more. Quietly, peacefully, endlessly. There is nothing you need to do. There is nowhere you need to go. The journey continues, always, whether you are watching or not, and you can let yourself drift now. Drift into sleep, knowing that the long, quiet story of the earth goes on, and you are a part of it, a beloved, welcome part, forever and ever, in the soft, deep stillness of the night. And the journey continues, always,